The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked window as I guided Victoria, her laughter fragile, heels wobbling. Her grateful smile unsettled me, dissolving the boardroom distance. Silence thickened the car, questions unspoken pressing against my chest. Tonight, a simple act of care had shifted everything, our worlds teetering on the edge of change. If you like our romantic love story videos, then press subscribe button and press bell icon for daily uploads videos. Watch till end. Thanks. The night air bit at my cheeks, sharp and unforgiving, carrying the faint tang of winter rain. My shoes clicked against the wet pavement as I guided Victoria toward my car, her arm lightly brushing mine. She leaned into me with that subtle fragility, a rare crack in the armor she wore like a crown in the boardroom. Usually, I avoided any entanglement with the higher-ups after hours. Boundaries were walls I liked to respect, but tonight, I felt a pull I couldn't name, as if the night itself had conspired to drag me into an unfamiliar orbit. "You really didn't have to do this," she murmured, trying to steady her voice and reclaim the control she so effortlessly exuded at work. Her heels teetered on the slick asphalt, forcing her to rely on my arm. I shrugged, forcing a casualness I didn't feel. "I didn't mind. Someone has to make sure you don't walk into a lamppost." My words were light, almost teasing, but my pulse thumped differently than usual. She laughed softly, a sound stripped of pretense, unguarded in a way that made me catch my breath. In the rearview mirror, I caught the faint glimmer of uncertainty in her eyes, a fleeting vulnerability I had never seen in board meetings or strategy sessions. The streets around us shimmered with reflections, neon lights blurring into ribbons of color across the wet asphalt. The engine hummed quietly, filling the car with a low, comforting pulse. Outside, the city carried on, oblivious to this fragile, suspended world we had entered. She tilted her head slightly, studying me, then asked a question that startled me with its intimacy. "Do you ever feel lonely, Ethan?" Her voice was soft, almost afraid, as if asking too loudly might break the fragile equilibrium. I glanced at her, trying to read the layers hidden beneath her polished exterior, the strength she projected in daylight. "Yes," I admitted quietly. "Every day, sometimes. But loneliness isn't the same as being without purpose. Lily keeps me grounded. She gives me reason. Strength I didn't think I had." My fingers gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. I wasn't used to sharing these truths, even with people I respected, let alone my boss. Her gaze softened, and the faintest crease appeared between her brows, a sign of thought, reflection. "I envy that," she whispered, almost more to herself than to me. "You stay steady, calm, while She paused, lips pressing together, a fleeting blush spreading across her cheeks. "I don't know. I sometimes wish I had even a fraction of that." I swallowed, the words settling in a hollow pit in my stomach. She was human. The unshakable, commanding Victoria I had known in the office was real, fragile, imperfect. And I, Ethan, single dad juggling life's chaos, exhausted yet resilient, was witnessing a side of her no one else ever saw. The intimacy of it, quiet but intense, made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't articulate. The drive continued in silence, punctuated by the occasional flicker of passing streetlights. Questions hung between us like smoke. Why did she look at me like that? Why did her words carry such weight, stirring a warmth that I wasn't sure I wanted to confront? I tried not to think too hard, focusing on the road, but the quiet intimacy pressed against the walls I had built for myself. "Do you ever regret choices, Ethan?" she asked suddenly, her voice threading through the hum of the engine. I blinked, startled by the suddenness, by the vulnerability hiding beneath her usually commanding tone. "I regret plenty," I said slowly, deliberately. "But not being honest about what I feel, not trying to protect the people I care about, never. That's worth any mistake." My words lingered, and I felt her glance flick toward me, lingering on my profile, tracing lines she had probably never noticed before. The city blurred past, reflections dancing on rain-soaked asphalt, like fragments of moments suspended in time. The air inside the car carried tension, warmth, and the unspoken possibility of crossing lines neither of us dared name aloud. I could sense her curiosity, her awareness of the change in dynamic, and, strangely, I found myself drawn to it, unwilling to pull back. We arrived at her apartment, the building quiet and still, yet charged with the unspoken energy that had built between us in the short drive. She hesitated at the door, heels removed, hair loose, the soft light of the hallway framing her in a way that made her feel both real and untouchable. "You've done too much already," she said softly, though her eyes betrayed a deeper question. The office boundaries, the roles, the hierarchy, it all dissolved in that moment. There was no boss, no employee. There was just Victoria, human, fragile, and searching for some measure of truth, and me, a man who had always lived in routines and responsibilities, suddenly untethered. I wanted to ask her what she was thinking, wanted to trace the unspoken question in her gaze, but I didn't. The tension, the intimacy, and the unknown, the delicate thread that now connected us, was too fragile to disturb. I stepped back, offering her a silent pause, letting her gather herself. She looked at me, and in that gaze, I saw a quiet cliffhanger, an unasked question, a possibility. Tonight wasn't just a night of escorting someone home, it was the beginning of something neither of us could predict, a door that had been unlocked by a simple gesture of care. As I walked away, leaving her apartment behind, I felt the weight of what had begun, the pull of an invisible thread that seemed to link our fates. The rain outside had stopped, leaving the city washed clean, yet inside me, the storm was just beginning. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew this night would stay with me forever, the first step into a world that was suddenly brighter, deeper, and unbearably human. And as the lights behind her apartment faded from view, I realized the truth I had avoided for years. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can unravel everything you thought you knew about life, love, and yourself. The apartment door clicked behind us, sealing the world outside into a quiet blur. The soft hum of the radiator, the faint tick of the wall clock, and the muted city noises beyond the window became the only soundtrack for a world suspended in this room. Victoria sank into the couch, the weight of her body pressing into the cushions, her heels discarded in a haphazard pile by the door. She exhaled a long, almost imperceptible sigh, and I realized then that the armor she carried at work, the sharp suits, the confident glare, the precise words, had dissolved completely. "I can't believe I let myself get that tipsy," she admitted softly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Her voice was quieter than I had ever heard, lacking the authority I had grown used to. Vulnerability clung to her words like fog on glass. I hovered near the doorway, unsure whether to leave or linger, drawn by something I hadn't expected. "We all have our moments," I said gently, my voice steady despite the strange flutter in my chest. "Even the strongest people." Her eyes met mine, and I caught the briefest glint of curiosity, of raw, unpolished honesty. She leaned back on the couch, exhaling slowly, almost as if the act of breathing itself released years of contained pressure. Her gaze wandered to the city lights beyond the window, and I realized she wasn't just talking about last night, she was talking about everything, the facade she wore like armor every day. "I envy you, Ethan," she whispered, almost to herself. "You manage everything, work, life, your daughter, without ever losing your calm, your focus." And yet, her voice faltered, hesitating on some unspoken confession. I took a step closer, careful not to invade her space, but unable to ignore the pull between us. "It's not always easy," I said. "Some days, it's chaos. But chaos teaches you what's important. It teaches you who you really are." Her gaze softened, and she studied me with an intensity that made my chest tighten. "I sometimes wonder if I even know who I am," she admitted. "I've spent so long trying to be what everyone expects. Strong, composed, untouchable. And sometimes, I'm just tired of it." The room was quiet then, charged with the weight of confession. Her vulnerability was magnetic, impossible to ignore, and yet I felt the caution of boundaries pressing against me. She wasn't just my boss, and I wasn't just her escort from last night, there was something unspoken threading between us, something fragile and electric. "I understand," I said softly, perching on the armrest of the couch, careful not to crowd her. "There are days when the mask is too heavy. Days when you want to let go, even for a moment." My eyes lingered on hers, searching for the unspoken question, the silent plea she hadn't yet voiced. She shifted, hugging her knees to her chest, and I noticed the tremor in her fingers. "Do you ever regret not having someone to see the real you? Someone who knows you beyond the suit, the office, the perfection?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the quiet like glass. I swallowed, feeling the weight of honesty settle between us. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But being alone doesn't mean being lonely. I have Lily. She's my anchor, my reminder of why I keep going. But, it's true, I sometimes wonder if someone else would understand all of it. The chaos, the exhaustion, the choices I make." Her eyes softened further, and a faint, almost shy smile touched her lips. "I wish I had that," she confessed. "Someone who grounds me. Someone who sees me, really sees me. Not the boss, not the person who has to be strong all the time. Just me." The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls enclosing us in a bubble of soft light and quiet revelation. I realized the intimacy between us had shifted. We were no longer just colleagues. We were two people, caught in the quiet gravity of a shared vulnerability, suspended on the precipice of something neither of us dared name aloud. I think, she began hesitantly, I think I've spent so long hiding, controlling, pretending, that I've forgotten what it feels like to be seen. To be human. And yet here you are, standing in my living room, calm, grounded, and I don't know why it matters so much, but it does. I felt a strange warmth, a pull I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just admiration, it was recognition, empathy, an unspoken understanding that something had shifted irrevocably. Her words lingered in the air like a fragile promise, a thread connecting us across the space between her confession and my acknowledgement. Sometimes, I said softly, people see the real us when we least expect it. And it changes everything. I let my words hang, heavy with unspoken meaning, leaving the door open for something neither of us was ready to fully define. She shifted slightly, leaning back on the couch, her gaze drifting to the window, where the city lights flickered against the dark sky. The silence stretched between us, comfortable yet taut, a fragile bridge over a growing river of emotion. She began, then stopped, biting her lower lip as if uncertain how to continue. The pause was electric, charged with questions neither of us could yet answer. I sensed her struggle, between the woman she had always been and the person she longed to reveal. I wanted to reach out, to offer a hand, a gesture, something tangible to bridge the distance, but I held back. The moment was delicate, fragile. To intrude would be to shatter it, and yet to retreat felt impossible. In that quiet, soft-lit living room, I realized something undeniable: boundaries were blurring. Professional lines, social expectations, and the carefully constructed personas we carried all seemed to dissolve under the weight of truth. And in that dissolution, something new, fragile, and terrifyingly beautiful was beginning to take root. The night pressed on, the city humming faintly in the background. Her gaze returned to me, lingering, almost questioning. And in that unspoken exchange, I understood. What had begun as a simple act of escorting her home had become far more complicated, far more intimate, and far more dangerous for the heart than either of us could have predicted. And as I watched her sink back into the couch, the quiet warmth of her presence mingling with the soft light of the apartment, I knew the night was far from over. Questions would remain unanswered, desires unspoken, and yet something had undeniably shifted. The line between us had moved, the bridge had been built, and neither of us could yet see where it would lead. The clock ticked softly, the faint reflection of the city lights catching in her eyes, and I felt the first tremor of inevitability, that this night, this moment of confessions and fragile honesty, would haunt us both long after the door closed, long after the city moved on. And neither of us could deny it. The apartment had settled into a hushed stillness, broken only by the faint ticking of the wall clock and the soft hum of the city beyond the window. Victoria had moved to the small kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water, her fingers trembling slightly. Even in the dim light, I could see the subtle lines of exhaustion etched into her face, the faint smudge of makeup beneath her eyes. She wasn't the untouchable boss I had faced in boardrooms, she was human, delicate, and unguarded. "Do you ever get tired of being strong all the time?" she asked suddenly, her voice low, almost vulnerable, as if the question itself had been locked away in some forgotten corner of her mind. She didn't turn to look at me, and yet I could feel the weight of her gaze, as though her eyes were pressing against the small of my back. I paused, unsure how much to reveal, unsure how to navigate the intimacy of this midnight confession. "Every day," I admitted, my voice steady but soft. "But some days, it's worth it. Being tired doesn't mean giving up. It just means you're human. You're allowed to be human." She let out a small, almost inaudible sigh, leaning against the counter. Her hair fell loosely over her shoulder, catching the faint kitchen light. "I envy that," she said, almost whispering. "To just exist, to carry your own weight without needing to always prove something." I stepped closer, careful not to crowd her, the tension between us thick but not uncomfortable. "Sometimes people wear armor so long that they forget it's heavy," I said quietly, more to myself than to her. "And sometimes, you just need someone to see you underneath it, even for a moment." Her fingers traced the rim of her glass absently, and for a moment, she seemed frozen in thought. I don't think I've ever let anyone see me like this," she confessed. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying a vulnerability she had never allowed anyone to witness. "Strong. Confident. Controlled. That's all they ever see. And I'm more than that. And maybe I'm scared someone will see it and think less of me." I wanted to reach out, to offer her a hand, to tell her it was okay, that being seen didn't diminish her strength, that it made her human, real. But I hesitated, aware that any movement could shatter the fragile bridge between us. Instead, I let my presence speak, quietly, with the weight of someone who understood. "You're not alone," I said softly, and she finally looked at me, her eyes wide and searching, glimmering with a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Even when it feels like it." Her gaze lingered on me, unflinching, and I felt an almost dizzying pull. The city lights from the window painted her in shards of gold and silver, flickering across her features, highlighting the curve of her cheek, the slight quiver in her lips. I couldn't look away. She wasn't just my boss. She wasn't just the woman I had escorted home hours ago. She was someone I was beginning to recognize, someone I was beginning to care about in ways I hadn't expected. I don't even know why I'm telling you this," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe because I trust you. Maybe because I feel safe, for a moment. And I haven't felt that in a long time." My chest tightened. The intimacy of her confession, the soft tremor of vulnerability, made the air between us electric. I wanted to reach out, to close the space, to tell her that she could feel safe, that I would see her, the real her, the person beneath the facade, but I stopped. The moment was delicate, fragile, a piece of glass suspended in space. Instead, I took a slow breath. "I'm listening," I said quietly. And in that simple statement, I felt the weight of trust settling between us, bridging the unspoken gap. She shifted slightly, moving closer, though still careful to maintain the invisible line between us. Her fingers brushed against the edge of the counter, and I noticed the faint tremor in her hands. "Do you ever wonder," she said slowly, "if someone would understand all the parts of you, the messy, quiet, imperfect parts?" "Yes," I admitted, my voice steady but reflective. "Every day. Sometimes I wonder if someone would see the chaos, the mistakes, the choices I regret, and still stay." Her eyes softened, and I felt the gravity of the moment deepen. She leaned back against the counter, the glow of the city behind her casting delicate shadows across her face. "And do you think that's possible? To let someone see you fully, without losing yourself?" I swallowed, the honesty of my answer catching in my throat. "I don't know," I said. "But I think it's worth the risk." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with the weight of confession, curiosity, and something more dangerous, desire. The unspoken tension vibrated in the air, stretching the seconds into minutes, each heartbeat echoing in the quiet apartment. The city outside was alive, oblivious to the fragile gravity building in this room, but I felt every pulse of it, every flicker of her gaze. She began again, hesitating, biting her lip as if uncertain how much to reveal. "I've spent so long trying to be perfect, trying to be untouchable, that I forgot what it means to feel seen. And now, I don't know what to do with this." Her words trembled, suspended between longing and fear, and I realized that what had begun as a simple act, helping her home, had become something far more complicated. Far more intimate. And far more dangerous for the heart. The night pressed on, the apartment warm and quiet around us. I took a careful step closer, letting my shadow fall near hers without crossing the line. She looked at me, eyes searching mine, and I understood. Boundaries were shifting. Lines that had always been clear, professional, polite, distant, were dissolving. And neither of us was ready to acknowledge where it might lead. Outside, the city lights flickered against the glass, mirrored in her wide, unguarded eyes. I felt the pull of inevitability. This night, this confession, this fragile trust would linger in both of us long after the world resumed its normal rhythm. And somewhere deep inside, I knew that when the morning came, nothing would ever feel the same again. And as she finally sank back against the counter, her fingers still trembling slightly, I realized that the bridge between us had been crossed. The path forward was uncertain, fragile, yet impossibly magnetic. And in that quiet, luminous apartment, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Tonight, our lives had begun to intertwine in ways neither of us could have anticipated. The morning light spilled through the sheer curtains, painting the apartment in soft golds and pale ambers. It touched Victoria's hair first, highlighting strands I hadn't noticed the night before, and then lingered on the curve of her shoulder, the delicate sweep of her neck. She stirred, blinking slowly, the traces of last night's vulnerability still evident in her gaze. I hadn't slept much, but neither had she. Our shared silences and confessions had stretched into the early hours, echoing in my chest like an unspoken melody I couldn't forget. Victoria sat up on the couch, pulling a thin blanket around her shoulders. Her eyes, usually sharp and untouchable, met mine, searching. There was something in that gaze, curiosity, hesitation, and a faint tremor of trust that unsettled me. She exhaled, as if gathering courage, and asked the question that had haunted my mind since last night. Ethan, why did you help me? Her voice was soft, tentative, almost afraid of the answer. I felt the weight of it, the fragility of the moment. It wasn't about courtesy or obligation, it was deeper. It was a question that demanded honesty, a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to reveal. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, pretending casualness while my chest tightened. Because you needed it, I said at first, testing the words. But she shook her head, that faint, incredulous smile playing on her lips. No. I mean really. You didn't have to. Most people would have left, or pretended it wasn't their business. I swallowed, thinking of Lily, of the countless small moments that had taught me how to see people beneath their walls. Maybe I saw a human being, I admitted softly. Not a boss, not a colleague, just someone who needed a hand. And maybe, I just cared. Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, the world outside the apartment seemed to vanish. The city's noise was distant, irrelevant. All that existed was the faint light, the warmth in the room, and the quiet intimacy that had grown between us in the dark hours. She was looking at me, really looking, and I felt the gravity of her gaze pressing against my chest. She began, hesitating, her fingers brushing absently against the edge of the blanket. Her vulnerability hung in the air like a delicate thread. I don't know why it matters so much. But it does. You matter. More than I expected. My pulse quickened. She wasn't just acknowledging a gesture, she was acknowledging me, the man behind the responsibilities and routines. The quiet gravity of it pressed down like a gentle weight, intimate and dangerous. I stepped closer, letting the warmth of the morning seep between us, careful not to cross the fragile line we had been tiptoeing along. You're human too, I said softly. We all are. And it's okay to let someone see that. Even if it's just for a moment. Her lips parted slightly, and I thought I saw the faintest shimmer of tears, though she blinked quickly, hiding them. The tension in the room thickened, charged with unsaid words, unspoken possibilities. I wanted to reach for her hand, to offer comfort, to erase the last hints of doubt in her eyes, but I paused. There was beauty in restraint, in letting her choose the next step herself. The city beyond the window had begun to wake, but inside the apartment, time was suspended. Every tick of the clock, every flicker of sunlight across the hardwood floor, carried weight. I could feel her pulse, subtle but insistent, matching the quiet rhythm of my own heart. Do you ever feel lonely, Ethan? She asked suddenly, and I realized she had noticed something in me she hadn't asked before. Her vulnerability had opened a space, and now she dared to enter it. Yes, I admitted, looking away toward the window. Every day. But being alone doesn't mean being lost. I have Lily. She's my anchor. But, there's still a part of me that wonders if someone else would ever truly see it all. Her gaze softened, and she took a small, tentative step closer. I think I understand that feeling, she said quietly. To be strong, to carry everything, it can be isolating. And yet, here you are. Calm. Grounded. And somehow, present. The intimacy of the words hung between us. It wasn't flirtation or confession, it was recognition, understanding, and a fragile trust forming like ice over dark water. I wanted to tell her that yes, she could lean on me, that yes, I saw her in ways no one else did, but I held my tongue, letting the weight of our shared silence speak instead. Victoria shifted slightly, wrapping the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The faint warmth of her proximity pressed against me, a reminder of the boundary we had yet to cross, and the tension of desire and restraint coiled quietly, tightly, in the room. She began again, hesitant, uncertain. I feel like, last night, everything changed. That moment, walking home, it wasn't just an act of kindness. It was, her voice faltered, the words catching in her throat. I took a careful step closer, matching her hesitation. I know, I whispered. And I feel it too. That, something is different. And neither of us knows where it leads. Her eyes held mine, searching, questioning, vulnerable, and in that gaze, I understood the truth. This night, this morning, had shifted everything between us. Boundaries blurred. Trust formed. And an invisible thread now tied us together, fragile yet unbreakable, teetering on the edge of something neither of us could yet name. I stepped back slightly, letting her choose how much closer to come. She looked at me, her lips pressing together, as if weighing possibilities. And I knew, tonight, or tomorrow, or the next time we met, she would ask the next question, one that could change everything. The city outside was waking, the sunlight growing brighter, yet the apartment remained a cocoon of warmth, vulnerability, and potential. And as Victoria turned toward the window, gazing out at the golden morning, I realized with a quiet certainty, nothing would ever be the same again. The world we had shared last night had ended, and a new, uncertain chapter was beginning, one built not on titles or roles, but on truth, intimacy, and the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find something real together. The morning had softened into a lazy mid-afternoon, sunlight spilling across the living room in wide, golden beams. Victoria sat on the couch, her knees tucked under her chin, wrapped in the blanket she had grabbed hours ago. I had poured us each a cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling the quiet space between us, grounding the tension that had been building over the last 2 nights. I set the cups on the coffee table, careful to meet her gaze, searching for some indication of what she was thinking. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight I hadn't expected. "For everything. Last night. This morning. For being here." I nodded, trying to appear casual, though my chest tightened. "You don't have to thank me," I said. "I was happy to be here." The truth, however, was more complicated. I was drawn to her vulnerability, the way she was letting me see a side of her no one else ever had. The side of her that wasn't sharp, commanding, untouchable, but human, fragile, and real. She shifted slightly, hugging the blanket tighter, and for a moment I saw the uncertainty flicker across her face. "I don't usually let anyone see me like this," she admitted, almost whispering. "Strong, composed, perfect, it's exhausting. And yet, I can't help but feel that being this exposed is terrifying." Her words struck me in a way I hadn't anticipated. The Victoria I had known, the one who commanded meetings and strategies, was gone. Here, in the soft glow of her living room, she was raw and open, and the intimacy of it sent a jolt through me I could neither ignore nor name. I took a careful step closer, the faint scent of her hair brushing my senses. "It's okay," I said softly. "It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And I see that. All of it." Her gaze flicked up, and our eyes met. I could see the conflict there, the desire to retreat, to regain control, and the simultaneous need to lean into the connection, the vulnerability. Her fingers fiddled with the edge of the blanket, twisting it nervously, and I noticed the faint tremor in her hands. She began, hesitating. "I think I've spent so long hiding, that I've forgotten what it feels like to be seen. And now, seeing you here, knowing you, you see me. It's overwhelming." I felt my chest tighten further. Seeing her like this, unmasked, uncertain, fragile, was a gift, and also a responsibility. "It's not easy," I said, settling onto the arm of the couch at a careful distance. "To let someone in. But it's worth it, if you find someone who actually understands." Her lips parted slightly, a soft inhale escaping, as if she were gathering courage. "Do you ever feel like, no matter how strong you are, no matter how well you perform, it's never enough?" she asked, her voice cracking just enough to betray her fear. "Yes," I admitted quietly. "Every day. But enough isn't about how well you perform. It's about who sees you, who understands. And, sometimes, the right person can make all the difference." The air between us thickened. I could feel her pulse, faint but insistent, echoing my own. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the city outside, filtered through the apartment windows, casting flickering patterns of light across her face. The intimacy of it, the closeness, the vulnerability, it was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. She shifted again, curling slightly into herself, yet her gaze never left mine. "I don't know what to do with this," she admitted, her voice a whisper. "With you being here, with all of this. It's unfamiliar, and I feel exposed, and yet safe in a way I haven't felt in years." I swallowed, the truth of my own emotions pressing against me. I wanted to reach out, to brush a loose strand of hair from her face, to let her know she could trust me completely. But I stayed still, letting the tension and the unspoken energy between us speak. The restraint was its own intimacy, fragile yet charged with meaning. "Victoria," I said quietly, my voice low, deliberate. "You don't have to figure it all out now. You don't have to decide anything. Just feel it. Accept that you're allowed to be seen. And I'll be here." Her eyes glistened, the faintest shimmer of tears threatening to escape. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing just slightly. "You make it sound so simple," she whispered. "But I've spent so long being everything to everyone else. I forgot what it means to let someone care about me." It's not simple, I admitted. It's terrifying. But worth it. I could feel the invisible line shifting, the distance between us shrinking ever so slightly. The tension hummed with quiet possibility, fragile and dangerous, yet filled with promise. She leaned back into the couch, the blanket sliding from her shoulders, revealing just a hint of vulnerability I hadn't seen before. Her gaze softened, studying me, and I realized with sudden clarity, the walls she had built were beginning to crumble. Slowly. Carefully. And I was standing right here, witnessing it all. The room was silent for a long moment, each of us suspended in the weight of unspoken words. I wanted to ask her to stay, to trust, to let this vulnerability remain between us, to see where it might lead, but I hesitated, aware that to push too far too fast could shatter everything. Instead, I let my eyes speak, let my presence speak. She saw me. Truly saw me. And in that quiet acknowledgement, something shifted. The room seemed warmer, more intimate, charged with a delicate tension that promised change, risk, and something dangerously beautiful. She began again, and paused, her lips pressing together. The hesitation hung in the air, a soft cliffhanger, a question neither of us dared to speak aloud. And in that pause, I felt it, an inevitability that had been quietly building since last night, a fragile bridge now stretching between us, waiting to be crossed. The city outside hummed softly, oblivious to the intimacy within these walls. The sunlight shifted, falling across the coffee table, illuminating our hands, our coffee cups, our shared space, the delicate evidence of trust slowly forming between us. And I knew, this moment, this connection, was the beginning of something neither of us could ignore. Something real, fragile, and unavoidable was starting to take root. And in the quiet warmth of the apartment, I understood the truth I had felt stirring since last night. Boundaries were blurring, hearts were opening, and what had started as a simple act of escorting her home had become the first step in a journey neither of us could yet predict. The golden sunlight had softened into the afternoon glow, spilling lazily across the apartment, brushing against the floor and bouncing off the walls. Victoria was sitting at the kitchen table now, a half-empty cup of coffee cradled in her hands, her gaze distant, thoughtful. I leaned against the doorway, careful to keep the space between us intact, yet drawn to her with a force I couldn't name. The room was heavy with unspoken words, every shadow and ray of light magnifying the quiet tension that had been building over the past 2 mornings. "I keep thinking about last night," she said finally, her voice low and steady, but laden with uncertainty. "About everything. And I can't decide what I'm supposed to feel. Or how I'm supposed to act." Her fingers traced the rim of the coffee cup, twisting it nervously. I moved a step closer, resting my hands on the counter near hers, letting my presence speak without intrusion. "You don't have to decide anything right now," I said softly. "Sometimes it's enough to just feel. To notice. To accept that the world can shift in one quiet moment." Her eyes flicked to me, searching, hesitant. "But what if it's too much?" she whispered. "Too fast, too sudden. What if I'm not ready?" "You don't have to be ready," I said, the words deliberate, careful, but carrying weight. "No one expects you to be. All that matters is that you acknowledge it, that you let yourself feel. That's courage too." Her lips parted slightly, and I noticed the subtle tremor in her hands as she gripped the cup. The vulnerability I had seen in her over the past hours now stretched across the room like a fragile thread, connecting us in ways I hadn't anticipated. She wasn't just the boss, the woman commanding rooms with authority, she was someone entirely human, entirely raw, entirely exposed. And I wanted to honor that, not rush it. "I feel conflicted," she admitted, her gaze dropping to the table. "I've spent so long controlling everything, being everything for everyone, and suddenly, someone sees me. The real me. And it terrifies me." I leaned in slightly, careful to keep my distance yet close enough that the energy between us could be felt. "It should terrify you," I said softly. "But fear and possibility often walk hand in hand. The ones who let themselves be seen, fully, risk everything, and gain everything in return." She glanced up at me then, eyes wide, searching mine as if trying to decipher some hidden truth. "And you?" she asked quietly. "Do you risk everything?" I swallowed, feeling the weight of honesty pressing against my chest. "Every day," I admitted. "Being a dad, living life, facing choices that don't have guarantees, risk is all I know. And sometimes, the risk isn't just about me. It's about letting someone else in. Letting them see the truth, the chaos, the imperfection. And hoping they stay." The air thickened, charged with the delicate tension between acknowledgement and restraint. She leaned back slightly, her gaze drifting to the sunlight streaming across the floor, as if trying to gather her courage. The shadows played across her face, highlighting the vulnerability, the uncertainty, the raw honesty that had never been permitted in the fluorescent boardroom lights. "I don't know if I can handle that," she whispered, her voice trembling just enough to betray her fear. "To let someone see me, completely. To risk everything." "You don't have to know," I said, taking a careful step closer. "You just have to try. Even a little. That's enough to start. That's where everything begins." Her lips pressed together, and I could see the inner struggle unfolding in her eyes, the push and pull between control and surrender, fear and longing. I realized then that this moment, this quiet afternoon, was pivotal. Everything we had experienced, the late-night drive, the confessions, the vulnerability, had led us here, to a decision point neither of us could avoid. "I feel like I've been holding my breath for years," she admitted, finally, her voice breaking slightly. "And now, I don't want to exhale. Not completely. But maybe I can." I let the words hang, resonating in the room like the fragile echo of possibility. My chest tightened at the realization that she was opening, not fully, but enough. Enough to let the invisible bridge between us hold. Enough to let something new begin. "Then exhale," I said softly. "And if it's scary, that's okay. Fear doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It means it matters. That it's real." Her eyes shimmered, a quiet vulnerability mixing with curiosity, and a faint smile touched her lips. She shifted slightly, bringing her hands to rest on the table in front of her, as though grounding herself. And in that gesture, I saw trust, fragile but undeniable, forming like glass catching sunlight. The room felt smaller, warmer, charged with potential. Outside, the city pulsed with life, unaware of the delicate storm of emotions swirling within these walls. Every shadow, every flicker of sunlight, every subtle gesture between us carried meaning. The line between professional and personal, between caution and surrender, was dissolving. And neither of us wanted to step back. "I don't know where this will lead," she said quietly, breaking the silence, her words deliberate yet hesitant. "But I want to find out. Somehow." I nodded, understanding the gravity of her confession, the courage it had taken to speak it aloud. "Then we'll take it one step at a time," I said, the words gentle but firm. "No expectations. Just presence, honesty, and the courage to feel." Her gaze met mine fully then, steady, searching, and for the first time, I felt the subtle promise of something undeniable forming between us. It was terrifying, intoxicating, fragile, and real. A decision had been made, not to rush, not to demand, but to acknowledge possibility. The sunlight shifted, falling across the coffee cups, the table, our hands, illuminating the subtle, silent decision we had made. And in that quiet afternoon glow, I realized that everything had changed. Our lives had shifted irreversibly, and the path forward, uncertain and delicate, was ours to navigate together. And in the gentle hum of the apartment, the faint glimmer of sunlight across the table, I understood. The smallest choices, the quietest confessions, and the simplest acts of courage could alter everything. And tonight, or tomorrow, or the next moment, we would continue walking that fragile, uncertain path, together.